The Reflection Hunter. Chapter 1. My name is James Hawks, 39, former Delta Force operator. 4 deployments, 2 medals for bravery, and 1 for an operation that officially never happened. Now I've left the dirty work behind and want to find peace in civilian life with my beloved wife Alice. I work as a night security guard at the Museum of Contemporary Art, where my wife Alice's mirror installation is exhibited. I thought I had left all my wars behind. As it turns out, the most terrifying one is just beginning. In a labyrinth of reflections made from thousands of mirror fragments, where truth has 1,000 facets, and the changed look in my wife's eyes frightens me more than all the combat operations I've been through. Night duty. 2:08 a.m. The museum's monitoring room, standard surveillance camera inspection. Left sector, lobby empty. 5th floor, sculpture gallery, no changes. West wing, security guard Rodriguez performing a scheduled patrol according to protocol. I methodically shift my gaze from screen to screen. Perimeter control, as they say in Delta. Sector by sector, camera by camera. Just work, just night. 2:12. Reflections Zone, the season's main exhibit, a mirror labyrinth that Alice worked on for 8 months. According to the monitors, the hall is empty. I switch to the next camera, then return. Something caught my peripheral vision. A shadow, a reflection. 12 years in special forces taught me to trust that tingling on the back of my neck. I focus the camera on the entrance to the labyrinth. 2:14. The image is blurry, but I clearly see 2 figures sliding between the mirror panels. The security system hasn't been triggered, possibly professionals. My hand automatically reaches for the holster with my service weapon. An 8mm Glock 43, standard model for private security, 6 rounds in the magazine. Not my usual combat equipment, but sufficient. I adjust the sharpness of the image and freeze. Alice, my wife, and with her, a tall man with a distinctive gray strand in his chestnut hair. Marcus Rieneur, the exhibition curator. The man who personally selected Alice's work for the season's main exhibition. They're not thieves, they're trespassers. The museum is closed until morning. How did they get inside? Why? Standard protocol requires calling the rapid response team, but I don't do that. Something in their movements, in the way Rieneur holds Alice's elbow, too intimate, too familiar, stops me. Professional deformation. Maybe. But in Afghanistan, I survived because I learned to notice details that didn't fit the big picture. And here, everything is wrong. I increase the volume. The system picks up Alice's whisper. Are you sure no one will find out? Security patrols this sector every 40 minutes. We have 28 minutes. Rieneur's voice sounds muffled, reflecting off the glass surfaces. And your husband? He's on duty in the East Wing. He doesn't even know about this camera. A smirk twists my lips. I know about every camera in the building. It's my job. Alice is wrong in thinking I don't check her creation. They slip deeper into the labyrinth territory created by my wife, where every angle, every turn was calculated and precisely adjusted by her for months. I switch to a camera deeper in the installation. The image quality is worse. Alice insisted on atmospheric lighting, creating problems for surveillance systems. But I see enough. Betrayal in MIRRORS. The center of the labyrinth is an octagonal room where each wall is a mirror. According to Alice's concept, visitors reaching the center should experience disorientation and an encounter with multiple reflections, a metaphor for the fragmentation of the modern self. That's what was written in the exhibition catalog. Words she processed deeply, whispered to me at night when she thought I wasn't listening. But now there are no museum visitors in the center of the labyrinth. There are Alice and Rieneur. I watch as my wife embraces the curator, tilting back her head. Their kiss is reflected in dozens of mirrors, multiplied infinity of betrayal. I see how her hands, the same hands that were running through my hair this morning, slide down Rieneur's back, how she presses against him. Something cold and hard tightens in my chest, a steel spring familiar from combat operations. Distance, separation of emotions from the task, what Delta operatives are taught. I turn off the sound. No need to hear their breathless whispers, fragments of phrases that could have been meant for me. I just observe, record facts. Alice removes her black sheath dress, revealing a pale body that I still considered mine. Rhiannon explores her. One mirror seems to reflect them at a strange angle, delaying the movement slightly when they change position. Perhaps a glass defect, perhaps a play of light, perhaps my eyes, tired from the monitors. I could go down now, catch them, make a jealous scene, break Rhiannon's well-groomed nose, twist his arm until the joints crack. I know at least 8 ways to do this without causing permanent damage. But that would be impulsive, the reaction of a man, not an operative. In Kandahar, such impulses cost lives. Instead, I methodically switch to the system settings of the camera in the center of the labyrinth. Activate recording. Create a backup copy on an external drive. Check timestamps. By 4:07, it's all over. They leave the same way they came. I track their movement through other cameras. Side exit, security code, which Rhiannon obviously knows, and they dissolve into the pre-dawn darkness. I look at the external disk with the video recording. Proof of infidelity, enough to destroy a marriage, but my intuition suggests that this is just the tip of the iceberg. In Delta, they teach, gather information before acting. Don't show your opponent that you know their tactics. Observe, record patterns, identify vulnerabilities. If this is war, and it feels exactly like that, then I've just discovered the first front line, and it runs through the center of my wife's mirror labyrinth. Patterns and observations. I'm used to patterns. During my service, I identified regularities in enemy movements, convoy routes, faces of locals. 3 consecutive actions, repeated twice, already form a pattern. Alice and Rhiannon were clearly following a pre-prepared plan, so most likely, this isn't a one-time action. For the next 3 nights, I install additional micro-cameras at strategic points in the installation. Modified Mobius C3s, slightly larger than a button, with wide-angle optics and 48-hour autonomous power. I place them in blind spots of the main surveillance system. All data is transmitted to an encrypted server that only I can access. On the evening of the 3rd day, my system intercepts the first signal. Not Alice, another couple. A woman in her 30s with heavy diamond earrings removes her wedding ring from her finger before entering the labyrinth. A middle-aged man, I recognize Ronald Keller, owner of 3 construction companies in the city, whose face regularly appears in business chronicles. He looks around before following the woman. Her muted laughter reflects off the mirrored surfaces. An hour later, an elderly man with gray temples and a young blonde in a black dress slip into the same entrance. My facial recognition algorithms return. Samuel Higgins, editor-in-chief of the Northland Tribune. She is Melissa Cole, an intern from the political news department. 2 days of continuous observation give me a complete picture. During nighttime hours, between midnight and 4 a.m., the mirror labyrinth receives at least 3 to 4 couples, always following the same pattern, first the woman, then the man. Always precisely calculated visit time, 43 minutes. Always influential people in the city. A politician from the mayor's office, the head of a mortgage company, the chief of tax inspection. I record everything in a spreadsheet. Names, times, durations. The pattern is flawless like a combat formation. This isn't just a series of spontaneous dates, it's a system. Each couple heads to the center of the labyrinth, the octagonal room with mirrors at different angles. There, in this kaleidoscope of reflections, I observe a recurring pattern. A man and woman making love, multiplied by dozens of reflections, watching their own movements in the mirrors and reaching incredible ecstasy from this. My military experience suggests, if there's such a clear pattern, someone is controlling it. an invisible conductor who created this scheme. I create an electronic map of visits, names, dates, durations. Blue lines connect participants with prominent positions in administration, business, media. Red lines indicate unusual decisions made by these people over the past month. The emerging picture reminds me of the secret map of Taliban positions from my last deployment, a web of connections, invisible to the uninitiated. On the fifth night, my cameras capture Alice and Rhiannon again, but this time they're not alone. After they leave, an elderly couple enters the labyrinth, State Senator Harrison and his wife. After the senator, a well-known banker, and so on and so on. A continuous flow of people with names appearing on newspaper front pages. I remember how Alice talked about her installation. It's not just art, it's a point where realities touch, a place where people meet their true selves. It seems many influential people in the city are meeting their true selves in very specific circumstances. But the strangest thing I notice when reviewing the footage at increased speed, a person not detected by my algorithms, a figure appearing in the labyrinth after each visit, movement too fast, too precise, cameras can't capture it. Delay means death. I remember my instructor from basic training saying, I install an additional camera with a higher frame rate. And wait. Diajit Yazidi SECRTS. Thursday, 00:17. The last couple media magnate Berger with his assistant leaves the labyrinth. I turn on the new camera. The image is clear though monochrome. A person of medium height with perfect posture rapidly enters the labyrinth. Marcus Rhiannon. He moves through the labyrinth with the confidence of a man who knows every turn. In his hands is a small electronic device resembling a detector. He heads straight for one of the mirrors in the central room. I zoom in on the image. Rhiannon slides open an almost invisible panel on the mirror frame. Inside is a miniature camera, so small that even a professional bug sweep wouldn't detect it. He extracts a tiny flash drive the size of a pinky nail. Over the next 11 minutes, the curator repeats the operation with 6 mirrors, 6 recording points, 6 flash drives which he carefully places in a special case. The pieces of the puzzle begin to fit together. Rhiannon isn't just my wife's lover. He's part of a more complex scheme, the operator of a surveillance system disguised as a work of art. At midnight on Friday, I record the next stage of the operation. Rhiannon in his office on the 3rd floor of the museum. A tall, silver-haired man in an impeccable suit arrives there too. The surveillance cameras in the corridor recorded his entrance, but his face is hidden from direct view. The man is clearly familiar with the security system's layout. My facial recognition algorithm delivers a result. Victor Schrader, Billionaire, collector, the main sponsor of the current exhibition, the man who personally approved Alice's project and allocated additional funding for her special mirrors. The recording has no sound, but I can read lips well enough, a skill necessary for silent operations. Schrader says, all materials in place. Rhiannon hands him the case with flash drives. Everything according to plan. The final elements are almost ready. The last phrase makes me tense. Something in his intonation, in the way Schrader takes the case, carefully, almost reverently, triggers an alarm signal in my subconscious. This isn't a simple exchange of information. It's the transfer of something vitally important. I activate additional resources that I kept in reserve. I hack into the museum's video archive system, gaining access to surveillance camera recordings from the last 3 months. I launch a search algorithm to identify Schrader's visits. Results appear after 47 minutes. Schrader visited the museum after closing at least once a week for the past 2 months, always on Fridays, always at midnight, always met with Rhiannon, and each time left with a small case. The collector isn't just sponsoring the exhibition. He's collecting something, something recorded in the mirror labyrinth. I launch a search through open sources on Victor Schrader. The official biography is impressive. Financier, philanthropist, patron, collector of contemporary art. Specializes in experimental forms and immersive installations. Born in Italy, educated in Britain, has lived in the USA for the past 15 years. Digging deeper is more difficult. I use military contacts, gaining access to databases that officially don't exist, and I find something strange. Information about Schrader before his appearance in the US is fragmentary, as if someone carefully edited his past. The only lead is a mention in a small circulation art journal. Schrader's special interest in 18th-century Venetian mirrors, particularly the works of Master Gregor, whose products, according to legend, possessed unusual optical properties. Venetian mirrors, Alice's mirror installation, digitized recordings of intimate moments of influential people in the city. Everything begins to form a pattern I don't like at all. Home theater. You're early. Alice flinches when I enter the apartment at 22:43. She's in her blue robe, her blue hair gathered in a casual bun. In front of her is a laptop with sketches for a new installation. Asked Ramirez to cover for me. I'm holding 2 cups of coffee from her favorite coffee shop. Thought you wouldn't say no to a latte. You're attentive. She awkwardly accepts the cup as if she didn't expect such a gesture. We're playing at normality. I'm the husband who doesn't know about the betrayal. She's the wife who doesn't know that I know. How's your revolutionary turn? I ask, nodding at the sketches. Alice's eyes light up. She starts talking about her work, and I notice changes that I wouldn't have caught without the information I've obtained. A new amulet around her neck, a silver disc with a strange, barely noticeable symbol. The same inverted Y that I saw on Schrader's hand. Her gaze, sometimes losing focus, wandering as if she's looking through me, seeing something beyond our apartment. And Victor said this could become the most significant contribution to rethinking contemporary art. Her voice changes when mentioning Schrader, becomes quieter, more reverent. He's so insightful, sees what others don't see. Schrader. I take a sip of coffee, hiding my attention behind everyday casualness. That billionaire who's sponsoring the exhibition. He's more than just a sponsor, James. Alice nervously twirls a strand of hair around her finger, a gesture that appeared recently. He's a visionary, understands that art can be a bridge between realities. Sounds interesting. I smile, keeping the conversation going. Do you communicate with him a lot? We meet to discuss concepts. Her eyes avoid mine. He chose me, says I'm special. My perception, my connection with reflections, they're perfect for his project. The danger algorithm in my head gives a red alert. This doesn't sound like professional collaboration, but manipulation. What's the essence of the project? A charity evening. Alice becomes animated. In 3 weeks, Schrader is modifying my installation, adding antique Venetian mirrors from his collection. I'll be the center of a live performance that will change the perception of everyone present. It will. Change my career, James. Change everything. I listen, nodding the peculiarities in her speech. The phrases sound rehearsed, as if she were repeating someone else's words. Her eyes shine feverishly. When she goes to shower, I check her laptop. I find sketches of the modified installation. The central part is an altar with an original Venetian mirror in an antique frame. Around it is a system of mirrors creating endless reflections. At the center of the composition is a female figure, tied to a construction resembling an astronomical device. In the margins, Alice's hand has drawn the same symbol as on her amulet, and a caption, "The observer sees all." At night I don't sleep. I listen to my wife's breathing. At 3:12, Alice gets out of bed, moving like a sleepwalker, approaches the mirror in the bathroom. I watch through a crack in the door. She whispers to her reflection. I see light through the cracks, He says I'm the key. Her reflection seems to respond with a second's delay. Or is it just a play of shadows? In the morning, I try to reach the real Alice. I remind her of our first meeting, an exhibition in a small gallery, her installation of broken mirrors, our conversation about how art can heal trauma. For a moment, her eyes clear. She grabs my hand. James, something's happening. I'm losing myself. He's in my head. The mirrors are watching. Then she blinks, smiles unnaturally wide. What were we talking about? I think I got distracted. She doesn't remember her words, but I do. And I understand that Schrader is doing something more to my wife than just seduction or manipulation. This resembles programming, or what we saw in terrorist camps using mind control techniques. Alice leaves for the whole day, an important meeting with Victor. I use this time to gain access to Marcus Riener's computer, the curator, my wife's lover and Schrader's right-hand man, the perfect source of information. The trail leads into darkness. Breaking into the museum system gave me remote access to all work computers, including Riener's machine. I launch a scan of his files from a safe location, an internet cafe 3 blocks from home. The first results are discouraging. Riener is methodical and careful, no compromising files, no obvious traces. But in Delta, we were taught, there are no absolutely secure systems. Everyone has a weak spot. I find it in cloud storage, a separate folder, access to which is hidden behind a triple authentication system. The hack takes almost an hour, but the result is worth the effort. Riener's files contain detailed plans for the upcoming charity evening, a diagram of the modified installation, a list of 108 invited guests, the political and business elite of the city, a detailed scenario for the live performance with Alice at the center. But most importantly, documentation of Schrader's project, about which Riener is gathering information behind his patron's back. It seems the curator doesn't fully trust the collector. He has compiled historical materials about 18th century Venetian mirrors, articles about a master named Gregor Schrader, Victor's ancestor. According to these documents, Gregor created a special glass processing technology allowing mirrors to retain the images reflected in them. The mirror Gregor worked on was broken under mysterious circumstances. The fragments scattered around the world, and now, according to Riener's notes, Victor Schrader is collecting these fragments back, incorporating them into a contemporary installation, preparing some ritual. The guest list for the charity evening exactly matches my own map of people recorded in the mirror labyrinth, as if Schrader was purposefully collecting compromising material on influential people in the city. But for what? Ordinary blackmail, too primitive for a man of his caliber. There's something else here. I download all the files, noticing a strange phrase in Riener's notes. The observer expects the mosaic to be completed, the same terminology that Alice used. After lunch, I track Schrader from the museum to his country estate, a mansion in neo-Gothic style, surrounded by a park. The central element of the complex is a stone tower about 30 meters high, much older than the main building. It looks foreign, as if transferred from another time and place. Using military binoculars with 20x magnification, I observe as Schrader carries a box, presumably with flash drives, into the tower. Then something strange happens. He freezes on the porch and slowly turns exactly in my direction. Impossible. I'm 2 kilometers away, behind dense trees in a camouflage suit. I can't be visible. And yet he looks straight at me, smiles, nods briefly as if confirming that he knows about my presence. I remain motionless for another hour after he leaves, take several pictures of the tower through a telephoto lens. Only when reviewing them later do I notice a detail that makes the back of my neck go cold. All the tower's windows are hung with mirrors facing outward. On one of them, the symbol is visible, that same inverted Y. Is it possible that Schrader saw me through a system of mirrors? Absurd from an optical standpoint. But what if these mirrors work differently than ordinary ones? I remember the words of my instructor in Delta. Unknown doesn't mean impossible. If the enemy is using a weapon you don't understand, don't deny its existence. Study it. Returning home, I realized the whole picture. The mirror installation, secret recordings, an ancient Venetian ritual, the symbol on everything connected to Schrader, changes in Alice's behavior. Everything indicates that I've encountered something beyond the usual criminal scheme. Schrader is preparing something large-scale. The charity evening is just a cover for a ritual, at the center of which will be my wife, and I have 3 weeks left to figure out how to stop him. I check my service weapon, the additional magazine. Looking in the mirror at my reflection, I address that James Hawks who was in Kandahar, Mosul, Mogadishu, the operative who never lost. Time for a new mission, soldier. The objective, save my wife, and possibly all these people from Schrader's list. My reflection nods, and it seems to me that it does so with a second's delay, like all reflections in this story, which is just beginning. Chapter 2. War requires intelligence. It doesn't matter who you're fighting against, Taliban in the mountains of Afghanistan or a mysterious billionaire obsessed with mirrors and rituals. Information is both weapon and armor. In Delta Force, we studied a target for weeks before firing the first shot, and now I'm planning the operation with the same methodicalness. My target is Victor Schrader. My territory is his country estate with the Gothic tower. And my reconnaissance shows that I have just 6 hours while he's at a charity reception at the Metropolitan Club. Infiltration into the lair. At the 5th kilometer of my run, I slow down. There's nothing suspicious about a man in a tracksuit who stopped to catch his breath by a hedge. Surveillance cameras record me, but I'm just part of the background, a jogger who deviated from his route. The perimeter of Schrader's estate is better guarded than I expected. Infrared motion sensors, hidden high-resolution cameras, patrols with German shepherds, every 37 minutes. Professional level, not what you'd expect from an art collector. I spot a blind zone between 2 cameras, 6 seconds, enough to slip through the hedge. It's troubling that such an obvious miscalculation is left in the system. Either the designers are amateurs or it's bait. I'll risk checking. In my backpack, I carry minimal equipment, a portable electronic device scanner, a compact wire barrier clamp, a Ka-bar knife, a gun unauthorized, without a serial number, thanks to old military connections, and a folding monocular with night vision mode. I slip into the gap between cameras, prepared to be noticed, but the alarm doesn't trigger. I continue moving from tree to bush, from bush to service building. The guards move in predictable routes, the main mistake of any security system. People aren't machines, they create patterns. The main building of the mansion glitters with lights, but the Gothic tower hides in the shadows. A separate corridor leads to it from the main house, immersed in semi-darkness. I check the doors, all locked, windows protected by alarms. But the tower is older than the main building. There must be other ways in. And I find it, a narrow technical crawlspace hidden behind a decorative ventilation grate. I can squeeze through, though it will require effort. Crawling 20 meters through a tight tunnel is nothing compared to the submarine simulator training we underwent in Delta. There, it was 2 hours in complete darkness with limited oxygen. Here, just a few minutes of discomfort. The tunnel ends in a technical room. Old boilers, tools, dust on the floor. No one has entered for months. The perfect entrance for someone who wants to remain undetected. Down a narrow spiral staircase, I descend into the basement. Here the air changes, becomes dry, chemical. A faint sound of working electronics comes from behind a massive oak door. I check it, not locked. A mistake or confidence. I open the door and freeze on the threshold. What I see is unlike anything I've encountered before. A laboratory, but not an ordinary one with modern equipment. Here, centuries collide, ancient alchemical devices coexist with high-tech computers. A wall of monitors broadcasts recordings from Alice's mirror installation. On each screen, a close-up of a face in a moment of intimate closeness. Here's Senator Harrison, his mouth distorted in ecstasy. Here's Banker Thompson's wife, her eyes closed, head thrown back. Here's Melissa Cole, that same intern from the newspaper. The recordings form a mosaic of reflections, assembled by an invisible operator. I notice something strange. In each recording, there's a moment when a person's reflection barely noticeably delays, moves asynchronously with the original, as if for a fraction of a second it existed independently. On a massive central table is a diagram of Alice's museum installation. 47 mirrors are marked with red dots. Next to it, technical documentation describing microchips embedded in the frames. Small transmitters, finest conductors, covered with some silvery compound. I photograph everything I see using my encrypted device. Recording facts, emotions can be processed later. A glass cabinet on the far wall attracts attention. In it, a collection of samples, pieces of ancient glass, fragments of mercury amalgam, vials with a dark substance. Each sample is marked with a date, the earliest, 1724. On the adjacent table, an ancient folio, its pages yellowed with time. The text is in Old Italian, but the diagrams are understandable without translation. Mirrors of special construction, arranged along geometric lines. Human figures at the center of the composition. And the same symbol, the inverted letter Y, on every page. Next to the book, a modern laboratory journal, a methodical, scrupulous record of experiments. The last page is dated yesterday, 4750 fragments integrated into the system, resonance stable, conductor prepared, final phase in 14 days. At the top a note, possible complication JH. I've been included in the equation. Schrader knows I'm watching him. VOICES from the shadow. The sound of footsteps catches me over the journal. 2 people descending the stairs. Conversation muffled but distinguishable. One voice, Schrader's characteristic Italian accent. The second lower with British intonations. I quickly evaluate options. The door through which I entered is too far. No windows. The only shelter, a massive wooden cabinet in the corner of the laboratory filled with books and instruments. I squeeze into the space between the cabinet and the wall. Not ideal, but if they don't search purposefully, they won't notice. In sniper missions, I lay for hours in exposed positions without being discovered. The main thing, breath control, complete immobility. The laboratory door opens. Schrader and his assistant, a tall man with military bearing, enter. I recognize the second man, Julian Barker, former SAS fighter, British Special Forces. 5 years ago, he was excluded from the unit under unclear circumstances. Now it's clear where he went. Monitoring shows that all changes are stable, says Barker, approaching the monitors. The subjects don't even realize the psychological changes. The Venetian ritual requires strong emotions, passion, fear, euphoria. Schrader runs his fingers over the installation diagram. Each mirror fragment is saturated with this. When a person is in ecstasy or terror, their soul is exposed, becomes vulnerable. The camera system has captured all the necessary moments. The recordings have been processed. Schrader nods, adjusting the impeccable cuff of his shirt. But Alice is special. Her connection with mirrors existed even before our acquaintance. Her soul resonates with the artifact. She's the perfect conductor. Did you see her works before I met her? She intuitively reproduced the principles of Venetian glass without knowing the theory. This is not a coincidence. Alice is ready, but her husband is a problem. Barker frowns. Military background, skills he's maintained. My sources say he was one of the best in Delta, the type they send when others return in body bags. Schrader waves dismissively, and I notice a scar in the shape of an inverted letter Y on his hand. A toy soldier, accustomed to direct conflicts. We're waging a war of reflections, Julian. He may be dangerous in a world of bullets and blood, but what does he know about the subtle matter between worlds? In a week, at the charity evening, the ritual will be completed, and no soldier will be able to stop what exists outside the physical world. They lean over the central table. Schrader activates a projection, a three-dimensional diagram of the museum with flickering points indicating the locations of mirrors. The observer has waited for centuries, continues Schrader. When my blood becomes the conductor, his essence will be able to fully connect with the physical world, and the city's elite, gathered in one place, surrounded by activated mirrors, an ideal reservoir of energy. Barker looks concerned. Are you sure you can control him? Schrader freezes. His voice becomes colder. He has existed beyond the edge for almost 3 centuries, gathering knowledge, accumulating power. You think I would become his instrument without guarantees? We made a deal. My blood is his path to our world. In exchange, I will receive what he has accumulated at the border of reality. Immortality, Julian. Not figurative, not in the memory of descendants. Real, physical immortality. Barker looks at the diagram. And Alice, what will happen to her after the ritual? Her soul will become an anchor, Schrader answers calmly. The first of many, she will pave the way for others. It's an honor, Julian, a great honor. I clench my fists so hard that my nails dig into my palms. For the first time since the beginning of the operation, emotions break through the professional mask. They talk about my wife as expendable material. This is sobering, focusing. The enemy is identified. The goal is clear. Schrader checks his watch, an antique with an intricate dial. We must go, the guests are waiting. At 10, I have a meeting with Billionaire for a final check of the scheme. You'll provide security. Already organized, sir. Additional personnel will arrive tomorrow. They leave, turning off the main light but leaving the monitors on. I wait 10 minutes, then leave my hiding place. My muscles are stiff, but my mind is crystal clear. I know what to do next. I need more information, and I know where to get it. Marcus Billionaire, curator, my wife's lover, and a cog in Schrader's mechanism. He's my next source. Interrogation with prejudice. At Billionaire's house, I wait in a car rented under false documents. It's a modest townhouse in the art district, not what you'd expect from a successful curator. Either Billionaire isn't so successful, or he prefers to hide his prosperity. At 23:17, a taxi stops at the entrance. Billionaire gets out, pays the fare, climbs the steps, pauses to check the mailbox. His movements reveal fatigue and tension. Shoulders lowered, gaze anxious. I let him enter the house, wait 5 minutes, enough for him to relax, maybe pour himself a drink. Then I approach the door, using a card lockpick, a simple but effective device that opens most standard locks. Billionaire is in the living room, whiskey with ice, shoes discarded, tie loosened. I close the door so quietly that he notices me only when I'm already in the room. His hand freezes halfway to his mouth. The glass trembles. Mr. Hawks, his voice reveals fear, but he tries to maintain a professional tone. What an unexpected visit. For both of us, I reply, approaching closer. Not threateningly, but confidently reducing the distance. I would prefer to enjoy a quiet evening at home, but my wife talks to mirrors, my cameras show you together in the labyrinth she created, and Victor Schrader is planning some ritual in which she's the conductor. So here we are. Billionaire tries to stand. I gently push him back into the chair. Don't complicate things, Marcus. I'm not in the mood. You break into my house and... I interrupt him, pressing him against the wall. What are you doing with my wife? What ritual is Schrader preparing? I don't understand what you're... The red case hidden in the ventilation shaft of your bedroom, I say. Flash drives in the hollow book on the third shelf, the hiding place in the bathroom behind the mirror. I was there while you were at the reception. I know about the video recordings you collect, about the people you blackmail, and about Schrader blackmailing you. This is a bluff. I wasn't in his house before, but I've seen how people of his type organize their hiding places, and I can see by his eyes that I've hit the mark. Rioner deflates like a punctured balloon. His shoulders drop even lower, his eyes show panic. You don't understand. If I talk, he'll destroy me, not just my career, me. If you don't talk, I'll destroy you, I reply calmly. And believe me, Schrader would at least have style. I have only efficiency. Rioner looks at me, assessing the threat, then nods, acknowledging defeat. Schrader blackmailed me, he says quietly. At first, he only asked for access to the museum after closing, then demanded technical specifications of all exhibition halls, then information about your wife. Why? Because of her work with mirrors. He's obsessed with them, collects them all his life, but not like an ordinary collector. He believes they possess power. Rioner stands, moves to the bookshelf. His hands tremble as he takes out a folder. Here, I collected this secretly, tried to understand what I was getting into. I take the folder. Inside, faded photocopies of ancient documents, notes in different languages, diagrams, and charts. Schrader is collecting fragments of an ancient Venetian mirror created by alchemist Gregor Schrader in 1724, explains the curator. His ancestor. According to these documents, the mirror possessed special properties. It could capture parts of souls of people reflected in it. Sounds like mystical nonsense. I thought so too, until I saw the evidence. Recordings from cameras in your wife's installation. The reflections. Sometimes they move on their own, for a fraction of a second, but it's noticeable in slow-motion playback. Rioner points to a photograph of an ancient mirror in a carved frame. The original mirror was broken under mysterious circumstances, the fragments scattered around the world. Schrader has been collecting them for the last 30 years. Now he has incorporated them into a contemporary installation, your wife's work. She doesn't know that her mirrors contain these fragments. What does he want to do with them? Complete the ritual that his ancestor couldn't finish. Open the path between worlds, as he puts it. I thought it was a metaphor, an artistic image, but he believes it literally. Rioner pauses, then adds, Alice isn't just a victim. Schrader believes she possesses an innate gift necessary for activating all fragments simultaneously, some special type of perception. He calls her the perfect conductor. I remember how Alice sometimes described her sensations from music, in colors and shapes, how she could spend hours watching the play of light. Synesthesia, that's what it's called. A rare neurological condition where one type of perception involuntarily triggers another. You were with her on his orders. Rioner looks away, and I see shame in him. At first, yes, he ordered, to get close to her, make her more receptive to his influence. But then, he hesitates, I genuinely fell in love with her talent, her vision of the world, and now I don't know how to save her. I look at him, a pathetic, confused man who became a pawn in someone else's game. He's genuinely in love with my wife. In any other situation, I would hate him. Now, he's just another fragment of the puzzle. What will happen at the charity evening? Schrader has modified the installation, added the final fragments, enhanced the scheme with special components. In the center will be an altar with an ancient frame for the final mirror fragment. Alice will be tied to the construction part of the live performance, as they'll explain to the public. But in reality, Rioner turns pale. I saw the ritual dagger, an ancient Venetian stiletto, in his office. It was on a special stand in a glass case. Now everything is clear. Schrader isn't just planning an occult ceremony, he's preparing a ritual murder. of my wife, in front of a crowd of the city's elite who will think they're seeing contemporary art. Thank you for the information, I say, standing up. If anything about this is a lie, I'll be back, and our conversation will be much less pleasant. What are you going to do? There's genuine concern in his voice. What I was taught, I answer, protect the innocent at any cost. SECRETS of Venetian glass. I study Reaneur's materials in a motel on the outskirts of town, a cheap room paid for in cash, the perfect place for a person who doesn't want to be found. The folder contains real treasures for investigation. 18th century engravings depict mirrors of special construction, arranged according to geometric patterns, people at the centers of compositions, with distorted faces, as if in ecstasy or agony. Historical records report disappearances after contact with cursed reflections. Aristocrats, scientists, priests, suddenly vanishing without a trace. The name of Gregor Schrader appears in documents of the Venetian Inquisition, an alchemist expelled from the city on charges of unnatural sciences and communication with forbidden entities. His main discovery, a method of treating mercury glass, creating an effect of inner light. In a diary that apparently belonged to one of Gregor's disciples, there are astonishing observations. Master Gregor claims that mirrors are windows not only into our world, but also into other spheres of existence. With proper tuning, he says, one can create resonance between our world and what lies beyond reflections. The most important find, a fragment of Gregor's own diary in Old Italian. I use an online translator to understand the key points. A mirror doesn't reflect light, it stores its blinding power, as well as the shadows of those who looked into it. I discovered that a special composition of amalgam, including mercury from underground mines beneath an old cemetery, creates an effect of delayed reflection. A face reflected in such a mirror is preserved for a fraction of a second even after the object has turned away. This proves my theory. Part of the observer's essence remains in the mirror. Gregor goes on to describe experiments to enhance this effect. Special glass cutting, silver threads fused into the frame, mercury amalgam mixed with unknown substances. And finally, a description of the main experiment. I created a system of 12 mirrors arranged around the central one, my masterpiece. When the subject is in the center and experiences strong emotions, passion, fear, ecstasy, their reflections in all mirrors begin to live their own lives. They move asynchronously, creating an effect of multiplicity. I believe this is not an optical illusion, but a breakthrough in the barrier between worlds. The last entry breaks off in the middle of a phrase. Today I will conduct the final experiment. If my theory is correct, then light reflected from all mirrors simultaneously and focused on the central one will create a portal for. After this, nothing. The story breaks off. But from accompanying documents, I learned that on the same night in Gregor's laboratory, an accident occurred. The mirrors were broken, the alchemist himself disappeared, and his disciples were found in a state of madness, mumbling about the man who went into the glass. Gradually, I understand the whole picture. Alice's installation isn't just modern art. It's a reconstruction of Gregor Schrader's experiment, parts of which were scattered around the world. Victor is collecting the fragments, incorporating them into a modern structure, using technology to enhance the effect. And my wife, with her special perception, is to become the victim completing the ritual begun almost 300 years ago. All this sounds like the ravings of a madman, but during my years of service, I've seen things that didn't fit into rational explanation. In an Afghan village, I met a blind old man who accurately described the location of an ambush waiting for us beyond a pass. In Syria, I saw a shepherd speaking 7 languages, including ancient Aramaic, which isn't taught in schools. The world is full of the inexplicable. And even if I don't believe in the mystical power of Schrader's mirrors, I definitely believe in his intention to kill my wife. And that's all I need to know for planning the operation. Changes in Alice. At home, I notice more and more disturbing changes in Alice's behavior. She sits for hours in front of the bathroom mirror, not moving, as if in a trance. Her album is filled with strange symbols, spirals, intertwining lines, geometric patterns matching the diagrams from Gregor's documents. When I ask her about these drawings, she answers mechanically. These are resonance schemes. Victor says they'll help me focus energy during the performance. Her voice sounds monotonous, without the usual emotional nuances. Her eyes seem foggy, like soldiers returning from particularly difficult missions, physically present but emotionally disconnected. On Saturday morning, I find her in the studio. All the walls are hung with mirrors of different sizes and shapes. She stands in the center, slowly turning, observing her reflections. "Alice," I call out. She doesn't react, continuing to rotate like a music box. "Alice," I repeat louder. She stops but doesn't turn around. "I see light through the cracks of reality," she says to her reflection. "He says I'm the key to the door that has always been here." I approach her, carefully turn her to face me. Her pupils are dilated, her gaze unfocused. "Who says, Alice?" "Schrader." "Not Victor," she smiles, a strange, absent smile. "The observer, the one who waits behind the glass. He has been watching us for so long, collecting our reflections. Soon he will be able to return." It sounds like delirium, but in the context of Reaneur's materials, it takes on a sinister meaning. I try to reach the real Alice, the woman I fell in love with 5 years ago. "Remember our first meeting?" I ask, holding her gaze. "The Broken Reflections exhibition at Anderson Gallery. You stood by your installation of mirror fragments collected after the explosion in the old quarter. You said each fragment was a piece of someone's story, preserved in glass. Remember what you told me when I asked why you do this?" For a moment her eyes clear, as if a veil falls away. She grabs my hand with unexpected strength. "James, something is happening. I'm losing myself. He's in my head. The mirrors are watching. They show other versions of me, and I don't know which one is real." I hold her tightly, trying to keep her in this moment of clarity. "Who is the observer, Alice? What does he want?" "He was the first to go into the mirror," her voice trembles. "Gregor, he didn't die, James. He crossed over and now wants to come back, use me as a bridge." Suddenly her body shudders, her eyes roll back. When she focuses her gaze again, Alice blinks as if she just woke up. "What were we talking about?" she asks with genuine puzzlement. "I got distracted for a minute." She doesn't remember our conversation, but I remembered every word, especially about Gregor, who went into the mirror. Sounds crazy, but it matches the records of his mysterious disappearance. I need to act faster. Alice is no longer fully in control of herself. Whatever Schrader is doing, hypnosis, drugs, or something more inexplicable, it's working. My wife is disappearing and someone or something else is taking her place. Ritual map. Marcus's computer provided me with details of the upcoming charity evening. Diagram of the modified installation. The mirror labyrinth transformed into a complex structure converging on a central platform. A list of 108 invited guests, the political and business elite of the city. Detailed plan for the live performance with Alice at the center. I need to see the changes to the installation with my own eyes. Using my position as a night security guard, I enter the museum after closing. Formally, I'm not on shift, but security knows me by face. No one asks questions. The mirror labyrinth is no longer what it was a week ago. Additional panels, new mirrors in exquisite frames. Assembly engineers are completing work according to the scheme I saw at Schrader's. I wait until the last worker leaves, then carefully examine the construction. The central part, a platform with metal fastenings, obviously for fixing the living installation, Alice. Above the platform, a massive antique frame waiting for the final mirror fragment. Examining the reverse side of the mirror panels, I discover microchips with transmitters built into each frame. The finest conductors, covered with a silvery compound, connect them into a single circuit. From a technical standpoint, it's impressive. Schrader has combined ancient knowledge with modern technology. Each mirror has a marking, a number and a small symbol, unique to each panel. I check them against the documentation found in Reaner's computer. Everything matches. This is an exact replica of the scheme described in Gregor Schrader's diary, but scaled and enhanced by modern means. In the service room, I find a map of power distribution for the installation. The consumption is colossal, 10 times more than required for normal lighting and special effects. So, there are components in the system requiring serious power, perhaps signal amplifiers for microchips, or something creating a special electromagnetic field. The technical part of the magical ritual becomes clearer. Schrader uses electronics to enhance the effect described by his ancestor, that very reflection delay that I noticed in the recordings. But this doesn't explain the changes in Alice, or the strange reflections that move asynchronously. If all this is just a high-tech staging for psychological impact on the city's elite, why does my wife hear the voice of the observer? Why does she talk to mirrors when she thinks no one is watching her? There's something more here than just technology, something I can't explain through rational analysis. A sudden thought makes me stop. I take out the pocket mirror I carry for tactical purposes, checking corners and closed spaces. I raise it, observing my reflection against the background of the installation. And I see it, a barely noticeable delay in movement when I turn my head, as if my reflection is a fraction of a second behind me, or resisting the movement. I blink and the effect disappears, possibly fatigue, possibly a play of light, or possibly there's a grain of truth in Schrader's crazy theory. Tomorrow is the charity evening, the culmination of long months of preparation. Schrader will complete his ritual. I must stop him. On my way out of the museum, I notice my reflection in the glass doors. For a moment, it seems to me that it's smiling, although I'm absolutely certain that my face maintained an expressionless look. Imagination playing tricks, or a warning. James Hawks, former Delta Force operator, will be ready for both possibilities. Chapter 3. For most people, war is just a word. For me, it's a way of life that has seeped into my skin during 12 years in Delta. War doesn't end when you return from the battlefield. It transforms, changes its front, but continues inside. Now preparing for the operation at the museum, I feel the familiar chill along my spine. Clarity of thought, heightened senses, combat readiness that transforms the body into a weapon and the mind into a computer calculating probabilities. Enemy identified. Hostage determined. Objective clear. Disrupt Schrader's ritual and extract Alice alive. Military preparation. The bathroom of our apartment has become a command center. Museum blueprints spread across the floor, critical points marked with red marker. Evacuation plan, technical specifications of security systems, guard patrol schedules. In Delta training they taught us, the better prepared wins. Alice left 5 hours ago, final preparations with Victor. Her voice sounded mechanical, her eyes remained empty. Attempting to forcibly detain her would only have attracted Schrader's attention. Sometimes you need to let the target think they're in control of the situation. I open the hiding place under the floorboard in the corner of the room. Here's what Alice doesn't know about. My emergency equipment. A modified Sig Sauer P365 with less lethal ammunition. They won't kill a person with the right shot but will guarantee incapacitation. 2 silent smoke grenades. A compact electronic jamming device, capable of blocking any wireless communication within a 15-meter radius for 30 seconds. A titanium Ka-Bar fixed-blade knife. A set of advanced lock picks, all compact, easily concealed. I dress methodically, checking each element. Waiter's pants black with an additional inner pocket for the weapon. White shirt, roomy in the shoulders to allow unrestricted movement. Concealed body armor level 3 protection, thin but able to stop a pistol bullet. Over it, a formal waiter's vest, perfectly concealing the equipment. The counterfeit invitation is flawlessly made. My new status, catering coordinator assistant, Alex Fowler. Marcus Rionner provided me with this pass, his final act of redemption for betraying my wife. Schrader won't notice me, he said, handing over the documents. I'm just another organizer in his eyes, but he'll be looking for you. He was right. I'll be moving in a high-risk zone. I take out a disguise kit from the closet. Contact lenses that change eye color from blue-gray to brown. Special wax for altering the shape of cheekbones and chin. Temporary hair dye, 2 shades darker than my normal color. Not a complete transformation, but enough to make facial recognition cameras return a low percentage match. I pick up my phone, hand-assembled with a modified operating system, impossible to track. I activate an encrypted communication channel with Rionner. If the situation follows the worst-case scenario, he's my insurance. Not ideal, but the only one available. Before leaving, I stop at the bathroom mirror. My movements are precise, economical, as in a combat operation. But something is wrong with the reflection. For a fraction of a second, it seems to me that the person in the mirror moves with a slight delay. I shake my head. Self-suggestion, caused by all this madness with rituals and magical mirrors. Professional deformation, as psychologists at the Veterans Rehabilitation Center would say. Don't let Schrader get into your head too, I tell my reflection. I think it smiles back. Evening of Illusiones. The Museum of Contemporary Art shimmers with lights. A red carpet stretches from the main entrance, lined with journalists, photographers, and security in tuxedos with barely noticeable earpieces. I pass through the service entrance. My cover is flawless. Alex Fowler, 32, 5 years in catering specialization, elite events. ID attached to my chest pocket, gaze professionally indifferent. The turnstile reads the QR code, the system gives the green light. The kitchen bustles with activity. Chefs finalize elaborate appetizers, bartenders mix cocktails. The coordinator gives final instructions. I blend into a group of waiters receiving trays of champagne. New guy, asks a dark-haired girl next to me. First day, I nod. Alex. Lauren, stick with me. I'll show you which zones are where. Perfect. Natural cover and access to information simultaneously. We enter the museum's main hall. The space has been transformed beyond recognition. The ordinary gallery has become a futuristic installation. Strobe lights, projections on walls, plasma screens displaying fragments of distorted faces. But the main feature, the mirror labyrinth in the center of the hall. Alice's modified installation now occupies almost 300 square meters. Mirror panels of varying heights and widths create a complex route, gradually narrowing toward the central platform. Unlike the original version, where everyone could choose their own path, this construction purposefully leads visitors along a spiral to the center. Guests are already beginning to arrive. Evening gowns, tuxedos, jewels on necks and wrists. Smiles, champagne, social conversations. No one suspects that instead of a charity evening, they've been invited to a ritual sacrifice. I maneuver between groups of visitors with a tray, professionally inconspicuous. I systematically scan the room, noting details. 6 guards with obvious military bearing, active communication earpieces, concealed holsters under jackets. 2 technicians controlling lighting and sound. Museum staff, most in their usual positions, but 3 new ones, with tense movements and attentive gazes. More of Schrader's fighters disguised as employees. Schrader himself appears at 2017. Impeccable tuxedo, perfect posture, gray-streaked hair groomed to perfection. Beside him, the museum curator, director, city mayor. The collector radiates confidence and charisma. His right hand, with the scar in the shape of an inverted Y, is hidden beneath a perfect white glove. And then I see Alice. My heart skips a beat, though I'm prepared for this moment. She looks nothing like my wife. Pale, with sunken eyes, face frozen like a mask. Blue hair contrasts with her white ritual-designed dress, a complex geometric construction of dense fabric with silver embroidery, repeating the symbols she's been drawing in recent weeks. Around her neck, a massive silver ornament with a central blue stone. Schrader leads her to the center of the hall for a welcome speech. Alice moves mechanically, like a marionette. I discreetly approach, continuing to offer champagne to guests, positioning myself within earshot. Dear friends, Schrader's voice envelops the audience. Today we've gathered to witness not just art, but true transformation. Ms. Hawks will guide us all through the mirrors of perception to true vision, to what lies hidden beyond everyday reality. Applause, admiring glances. No one notices how one of Schrader's assistants discreetly pours a clear liquid from a tiny vial into Alice's glass. She drinks automatically, following Schrader's silent command. The living installation will begin precisely at 21:30, continues the collector. Until then, enjoy the conversation and exquisite refreshments. And of course, first impressions of the updated Labyrinth of Reflections, which now includes fragments from my collection of 18th century Venetian mirrors. Alice smiles an empty smile. Her facial expression doesn't change as she turns to different groups of guests. Not a living person, a puppet controlled by invisible strings. While the public admires the updated installation, I notice Schrader whispering something to the head of security. The man tenses, his gaze beginning to scan the hall. They're looking for me. They suspected I might appear and have now activated the search. I slowly retreat to a less illuminated part of the hall, continuing to play the role of an attentive waiter. After 20 minutes, I see Schrader leading Alice to the center of the labyrinth. Operation time is shrinking. I need to act immediately. First contact. I use the cocktail party commotion to approach the edge of the labyrinth. Guests enter and exit, laugh, take selfies against the backdrop of endless reflections. I glide between groups, inconspicuous in my waiter uniform, until I find myself a few meters from Alice. Schrader gets distracted by a conversation with an influential politician. This is my chance. I quickly intercept Alice by the arm, drawing her into a side corridor of the mirror labyrinth, where reflections shield us from outside eyes. Alice, I say quietly, removing the darkened glasses, part of my disguise. It's me, James. She looks at me with an unfocused gaze. Her pupils are so dilated that the iris is almost invisible. The drug in the champagne, I realize. Something causing high suggestibility and a dissociative state. James, her voice sounds distant. I can't, he's in my head, mirrors. Listen to me carefully. I squeeze her shoulders, trying to break through the haze. Schrader is using you. This isn't a performance. It's a ritual and you're in danger. We need to get out of here. For a moment, her gaze clears. The observer, he's waiting, behind the reflections. Gregor didn't die, James. He went into the mirror and now wants to return, through me. I know, but I won't let that happen. Hold on, I'll get us. Suddenly, her face contorts in terror. He sees, she whispers, looking over my shoulder. He always sees through reflections. I turn sharply and see a Schrader guard's reflection in the mirror opposite. He stands around the corridor bend, not seeing us directly, but in the reflection our figures are clearly visible. His face changes from puzzlement to recognition. Military bearing, scar across the eyebrow, former special forces, I determine. Our gazes meet in the mirror, professional recognition. It's him, into the guard's radio. Subject in Sector D7. I instantly assess the situation. Alice is in such a state that extracting her unnoticed won't succeed. I need to buy time, create a diversion. Meet me in the center, I tell Alice, knowing she'll head there anyway according to Schrader's plan. Whatever happens, remember, I'm here to protect you. I release her, allowing her to return to the route prescribed by the ritual. I turn to face the approaching guard. I overturn a tray of glasses, creating a commotion and blocking his path. Frightened exclamations from guests, the sound of breaking glass, champagne on expensive shoes, perfect distraction. I'm already moving, sliding between mirror panels. From the corner of my eye, I see the guard calling for backup. 3 professional fighters against 1 special forces operator in a labyrinth of mirrors. Usually, I'd say the odds are even. But here, among distorted reflections where reality mingles with illusion, the advantage is mine. The pursuit begins. A game of hide-and-seek among endless reflections, where everyone can be both hunter and prey. Dance of SHADOWS. The mirror labyrinth is the perfect environment for evasion tactics and sudden strikes. I slide between panels, using the installation's architecture, corridors, niches, unexpected dead ends, appearing and disappearing in a kaleidoscope of reflections. The guards have split up, trying to surround me. Good tactic, if not for the peculiarities of the space. Here, among endless reflections, smaller groups become more vulnerable. A lone individual is harder to track through mirrors than a pair of coordinating people. I wait, evaluating their movements. The first guard, youngest of the 3, acts too predictably. He was trained for open confrontations, not for this environment. Choosing a moment when he's isolated from colleagues, I appear from a blind spot behind him. Strike to the carotid artery, precisely calculated pressure. Not to kill, to disable. As he loses consciousness, I catch him, carefully lowering him to the floor behind one of the mirror panels. I take his earpiece, insert it into my ear. Now I can hear their coordination. Sector B clear, checking C4. Received. I'm at the northern entrance to the labyrinth. Knowledge of their positions, critical advantage. I move silently, using the labyrinth's acoustic peculiarities. Sounds reflect off mirrors, creating false sources. I deliberately touch a panel in one part of the labyrinth, appear in the opposite. The second guard moves more professionally. Checks corners, controls blind spots. But his basic principle of perception betrays him. A person believes their eyes. In this installation, a fatal mistake. I allow him to see my reflection in a distant mirror as if I'm 10 meters ahead. He accelerates, moving into attack mode, not noticing that I'm behind him. Reflection in reflection, an optical illusion created by the specific arrangement of mirrors. The moment he passes by me, I attack. A blow to the solar plexus deprives him of breath. The next turns off consciousness. Keir, report position, comes through the earpiece. No answer. Keir, Bradley, come in. The third guard, judging by his voice, is the most experienced. He understands something has gone wrong. I hear him switching to a separate channel. Potential security breach in the labyrinth. 2 operatives not responding, requesting backup. Time is running short. I must neutralize him before backup arrives. This fighter moves more cautiously, avoiding open spaces, checking reflections in a pocket mirror. Smart move. He drives me into a dead end in the western part of the labyrinth, a narrow corridor ending in a triangular niche surrounded by mirrors. The only exit past him. End of game, Hawks, he says, taking out a pistol with a silencer. Come out with your hands up. He knows my name, knows who I am. I evaluate options. Fighting in a confined space is disadvantageous. Need to create an advantage. I take out a pocket mirror, holding it at such an angle as to create a false reflection of my position. A simple but effective trick. The guard sees my approach from the right, although I'm actually moving from the left. When he fires at the false target, I'm behind his back. He's good, feels the movement, turns faster than I expected. We engage in close combat, blocks, strikes, grips. His technique reveals special training, possibly Navy SEALs or similar unit. "You don't understand," he whispers as we clinch. "The observer has waited for centuries. This is more than just a ritual." I manage to execute a chokehold, cutting off blood flow to the brain. Before losing consciousness, he squeezes out final words. "The lighthouse, tower, everything leads to the beacon." His body goes limp. I check his pulse stable. I search him and find a strange discovery, a miniature transmitter in his ear, different from standard security headsets. I install it on myself, hear Schrader's voice. "We start now, they won't hold him." Time has run out. I move toward the center of the labyrinth, every nerve, every muscle in combat readiness. The final confrontation is inevitable. Performance with sacrifice. The central part of the labyrinth has been transformed beyond recognition. The octagonal room, where visitors once contemplated their multiple reflections, has now become a ritual space. The floor is covered with a complex geometric pattern of glowing lines. In the center, a platform resembling an astronomical instrument, concentric circles rotating independently of each other, with metal fastenings for hands and feet. Above the construction, a massive antique mirror frame, still empty. Alice is tied to this construction, her arms and legs fixed in a position resembling the Vitruvian Man, the classical symbol of perfect proportions. Her white dress contrasts with the dark metal of the fastenings. Eyes closed, face serene, as if she's sleeping. Schrader stands nearby, having already changed his elegant tuxedo for ceremonial clothes, a long mantle of deep blue with silver embroidery. Gloves removed, and I see his right hand with the characteristic scar in the shape of an inverted Y. Around, the city's elite, positioned along the perimeter of the central room. They observe with admiration and slight puzzlement, taking what's happening for avant-garde contemporary art. None of them understand the real nature of the event they're attending. Schrader raises his hands in a theatrical gesture. "Dear guests," his voice is amplified by hidden speakers, creating an effect of multiple voices. "Today we're at the border of worlds. Through Ms. Hawks' art, through my collection, and through your energy as witnesses, we will open the doors of perception." The light changes, becomes pulsating. The mirrors around begin to vibrate with a low humming sound. Reflections distort, like the surface of water into which a stone has been thrown. "Through this woman," continues Schrader, "art and reality will become one. Boundaries will dissolve, and we will see the truth behind the veil of the ordinary." I make my way closer through the crowd of spectators. Schrader is accelerating his plan, sensing the threat. From a case beside him, he extracts two objects, the central mirror fragment in an antique microframe and a Venetian stiletto, a thin ceremonial dagger with characteristic engravings on the blade. I recognize the weapon, having seen similar ones in museums. Stilettos of this form were used not for combat but for ritual killings, the thin blade perfect for penetration between ribs, straight to the heart. Minor bleeding, almost instantaneous death. Reflection becomes reality. Reality becomes reflection. Schrader raises the mirror fragment, inserting it into the central frame above Alice. The circle closes after nearly 3 centuries. When the fragment locks into place, something inexplicable happens. All mirrors around flash with bluish light, as if illuminated from within. Reflections distort more, begin moving with noticeable delay relative to the originals. The audience applauds, taking this for special effects of contemporary art. But I see strange expressions on some guests' faces, a mixture of disorientation and vague anxiety. Something is happening to their perception. Schrader raises the stiletto, taking a step toward Alice. The final act, the merger of art and life, form in essence. I understand. The ritual requires the blood of the conductor. Schrader intends to kill Alice, here and now, in front of 100 witnesses who will think they're watching a performance. The audience falls silent. Light focuses on Schrader and Alice. The rest of the space plunges into semi-darkness. The perfect moment for my intervention, but I face an unexpected problem. Shot through space. I break through to the inner circle, but Schrader activates the final element of his system. Light reflected from the outer mirrors refracts through a complex system of lenses and prisms, creating a holographic effect. Dozens of identical reflections of Schrader appear around the platform, each exactly repeating his movements. An optical illusion of such complexity that even my trained eye cannot determine where the real Schrader is and where his reflections are. They all simultaneously raise stilettos, approaching Alice from different directions. I draw my pistol, but hesitate. A wrong shot could hit an innocent spectator or, worse, Alice herself. I need to identify the real Schrader among dozens of identical figures. Schrader senses my presence. His voice echoes through the hall. And here's our soldier. You think you can stop what began centuries ago. For a bullet to reach its target, you need to know where that target truly is. He's right. In this kaleidoscope of reflections, I cannot confidently determine which figure is material. It's like trying to shoot a ghost. And then something unexpected happens. Alice, who seemed immersed in a trance, suddenly opens her eyes. At the moment when the drug's effect should be maximal, she somehow gains clarity of consciousness. Her gaze fixes not on the approaching figures of Schrader, but on one specific detail, the collector's right hand, where the characteristic scar in the shape of an inverted Y is visible. This mark is visible only at a certain angle of lighting, and only on the real Schrader. Our eyes meet across the space of the central platform, silent understanding. She slightly tilts her head, indicating direction. Through illusions and reflections, she shows me the truth. This is a moment of absolute concentration, familiar to every sniper. The world narrows to the point of aim, sounds fade, time slows down. I analyze the arrangement of mirrors, angles of reflection, trajectory of light. I recall countless trainings in Delta where we were taught to make impossible shots, through slits with ricochet by sound. The solution comes in a split second. I make not a direct shot at Schrader, but a calculated ricochet. The bullet must reflect off 3 consecutive mirrors at specific angles to hit Schrader's hand at the moment when the stiletto almost touches Alice's neck. Calculation inhale, adjustment for refraction angle shot. The sound of the shot, muffled by the built-in silencer, almost gets lost in the background music. The bullet flies along a complex trajectory, reflecting off mirrors exactly as I calculated. Physics and geometry in pure form, multiplied by years of training and intuition. Chapter 4, Finale. Broken reflection. After my shot, the museum became the epicenter of chaos. Schrader's stiletto clattered against the metal construction, flying from his shot-through hand. The spotlights, previously focused on the living installation, suddenly flooded the entire space with harsh, merciless radiance. Charity evening guests finally saw reality through the illusion of art. Alice, tied to a strange mechanism, and Schrader with a bloodied hand and a dagger at his feet. The first second's paralysis as before an explosion. Then a wave of panic, screams crushing at exits, overturned glasses, glittering shards on the marble floor. Security tries to maintain order, but even professionals are confused by the intermediate position between crime and performance. Schrader, clutching his wounded hand, smiles strangely. Blood seeps through his fingers, dripping onto the central mirror in the antique frame. With each drop, the glass seems to come alive, pulsating from within with bluish light. "You cannot stop what has already begun," he shouts, overpowering the crowd's noise. "Fragments in each of you, he sees through all reflections, has always seen." In his eyes, not the despair of a loser, but the ecstasy of a believer who has witnessed a miracle. This worries me more than everything that happened before. I make my way through the retreating crowd to the central platform. Alice is still secured in metal bracelets, her eyes half-closed, breathing shallow. The fixation system is more complex than it appeared from a distance, numerous locks and fastenings, each with a separate mechanism. "Hold on," I say, first freeing her wrists. "It's over, you're safe." But something in her gaze suggests otherwise. When I finally remove the last fastening from her ankle, she falls into my arms, weak as a rag doll. Her skin is cold, despite the heat in the hall. "Light inside," she mumbles. "He's waiting, beyond the edge, always waited." At this time, police arrive, their sirens cutting through the night. Officers surround Schrader. He doesn't resist, allowing handcuffs to be placed on him, maintaining a mysterious smile, as if he knows something inaccessible to others. "This is not the end, Mr. Hawks," he says as police lead him past us. "It's merely a tear in the veil. He's already here among us, not in one mirror in all, the beacon. Everything always leads to the beacon." In his eyes, a strange gleam unlike madness, rather absolute certainty. In the evacuation commotion, I notice movement by the broken mirror at the center of the installation. Schrader's lab assistant, the same one I saw at his mansion, quickly gathers shards into a special container lined with dark velvet. He moves methodically, selecting only certain fragments, ignoring others. "Stop," I shout, trying to attract the nearest policeman's attention. "Need to stop him. Those fragments evidence." But my voice drowns in the general noise. When the officer finally reacts and turns in the indicated direction, the assistant has already disappeared, taking with him what might be the key element of the entire puzzle. I focus on Alice. Right now, her condition is more important than the chase. Paramedics arrive simultaneously with police, and I hand my wife into their care, explaining that she was under the influence of an unknown drug. "We're going to St. Elizabeth's Hospital," the medic informs me, securing an IV. "You can follow us." I nod, casting a final glance at the destroyed installation. The mirrors, recently pulsating with blue light, now look ordinary, but something in them has changed, a barely perceptible shift in perspective, like a window frame slightly warped after an earthquake. As the ambulance doors close and the vehicle speeds away, I have an unpleasant feeling that we're being watched by thousands of invisible eyes. From every reflective surface, from every shop window and puddle on the pavement. Illusion of return. Alice is discharged from the hospital after 3 days. The diagnosis sounds safe and rational. Narcotic poisoning with an unknown psychoactive substance with pronounced hallucinogenic effect. Toxicologists found traces of a complex chemical cocktail in her blood, including derivatives of LSD, ketamine, and a rare alkaloid from South American plants that causes high suggestibility. Such substances can cause temporary disorientation, perception disorders, and increased susceptibility to external suggestion, explains the neurologist when I take her home. But the effects are reversible. Complete recovery may take from several days to a couple of weeks. I sign papers, listen to recommendations, receive prescriptions for sedatives and vitamins. Everything under control. A rational medical approach to what happened. This should be reassuring, but it seems to me that doctors see only the surface, like the guests at the charity evening. At home, Alice seems physically and emotionally exhausted, but more conscious than in recent weeks. She moves slowly, as if still adapting to her own body, but her gaze is clear, focused. "Are you hungry?" I ask, helping her settle on the couch. "I can make an omelet or order something." "James," her voice sounds fragile but determined. "What happened? I remember fragments, Schrader, museum, strange ritual, but everything's as if in a fog. How did I end up at the center of all this?" I sit beside her, choosing words. How to explain this entire nightmare without worsening her condition? "Schrader manipulated you," I begin. "Used drugs, psychological techniques. He believed in some ancient Venetian magic connected with mirrors. Your installation became part of his insane plan. He wanted to use you as a conductor for some ritual. I don't say he planned to kill her. Not now when she's so vulnerable. Alice listens, her face growing paler. When I get to the night at the museum and the interrupted ritual, she closes her eyes. I remember blood, she whispers. His blood on the mirror and light, cold blue light as if from the ocean depths. Then she opens her eyes and in them, sudden realization. Marcus, her voice trembles. I cheated on you with Marcus, in the labyrinth. Her fingers dig into the armrest of the couch, knuckles whitening from tension. It's as if it wasn't me, James. Schrader. He said I was special, that only through me would art gain true power. I knew it was manipulation, but couldn't resist, as if part of me watched from the side while another carried out his orders. I take her hand, feeling how she trembles. You were under the influence of drugs. It's not your fault. You, forgive me, disbelief in her voice. There's nothing to forgive, I answer, and it's true. My anger, my jealousy, all of it was directed at Schrader and Venetian, not at Alice. She was a victim, not guilty. She nestles against me, and we sit like that for several minutes. It seems like fragments of our life are beginning to come back together, that we can return to normalcy. The illusion lasts until midnight. I wake up to the sound of footsteps. Alice isn't beside me in bed. Moonlight penetrates through the blinds, drawing silver strips on the floor. I follow these strips to the bathroom from where quiet whispers come. The door is ajar. Through the crack, I see Alice's back, her tense posture before the mirror. She hasn't turned on the light and her figure seems just slightly denser than a shadow. He was always part of me, I hear her whisper. Even before we met, I felt his presence in reflections. He waited for me to find the fragments. I'm about to interrupt this eerie monologue, but stop when I see what's happening in the mirror. Alice's lips move, pronouncing one set of words, but her reflection seems to answer her, forming different phrases. This must be a play of light, an optical illusion, enhanced by my fatigue and the tension of recent days. Rational explanations line up in my mind, but they all crumble when I see how Alice's reflection smiles, though her actual face remains motionless. I retreat silently, return to bed, pretending to be asleep when she comes back. Her skin, when she lies down beside me, is colder than it should be. Something returned from the museum with Alice, something that wasn't in her before, and I'm not sure it can be cured with sedatives and vitamins. Split. After a week, the symptoms become impossible to ignore. Alice loses orientation in space, sometimes stopping in the middle of a room, looking confused as if not understanding where she is. She talks to mirrors, not just in the bathroom but to any reflective surface. The teapot, window glass, screen of a turned-off TV. But most disturbing, her new studio. The room I refitted for her after discharge is now hung with mirrors of all possible sizes and shapes. Some she bought, others she found, still others she seems to have brought from somewhere. Walls, ceiling, even parts of the floor covered with reflective surfaces, creating an endless kaleidoscope of images. Why do you need so many mirrors? I ask, standing at the threshold of the studio, hesitant to enter. Alice sits in the center of the room on a low stool, surrounded by her own reflections, multiplied to infinity. I see different versions of myself, she answers, not turning around. In each mirror, another Alice. Some of them are me at other moments in time. Others are me in worlds that could exist. And some. She falls silent, her shoulders tensing. And some aren't me at all. I take a step into the room, wincing at the dizziness caused by this visual chaos. Alice, this is the effect of drugs, hallucinations. No, she turns sharply, and I see her eyes are reddened from lack of sleep. These aren't hallucinations. I've always seen what others don't see. Remember, I told you how I perceive music in colors and shapes, how I feel textures where others see only surfaces. My synesthesia isn't a disease, James. It's a gift. I just now see more. She stands, approaches me, takes my hands. At this moment, her gaze clears as if a veil falls away, and I see my Alice, the woman I fell in love with 5 years ago. Something is happening to me, she says more quietly. I feel like I'm losing myself. Part of me stayed there inside the glass, as if I've been divided into fragments and not all returned. Her fingers squeeze mine with unexpected strength. And what returned is not only me. Something ancient looks from every reflection. It's patient. It waited almost 3 centuries, and now uses me as a bridge. Her words frighteningly echo what Schrader said, as if they've both become part of the same insane worldview. One morning, the situation reaches a critical point. I enter the bedroom after a run and see Alice standing before the vanity mirror. Her hair is tangled. Her face bears an expression of absolute terror. "Alice," I call out, "what's wrong?" She turns around and I don't recognize the expression on her face. Pure, undiluted rage. "You," she screams, backing away. "Not real, imposter." "Alice, it's me, James." I try to speak calmly, approaching slowly with open palms. "Liar," she grabs a desk lamp, swings. The real James is in the reflection. I see him there behind the glass. He's trying to warn me. I have to disarm her, carefully but firmly. When I restrain her, she fights with unexpected strength, then suddenly goes limp, her eyes roll back, and she loses consciousness. At the hospital, doctors diagnose post-traumatic stress disorder with psychotic episodes. They prescribe tranquilizers and neuroleptics, promising that medication therapy will stabilize her condition. But after 2 days, it becomes clear that the medications only worsen the situation. Alice turns into a shadow, apathetic, with an empty gaze, unable to focus. Her only manifestation of life, when she sees her reflection. Then her eyes light up with a strange gleam, and she reaches for the mirror as if wanting to pass through it. Doctors shrug helplessly. The psychiatrist suggests more aggressive treatment, electroconvulsive therapy. I refuse, taking Alice out of the hospital. If traditional medicine is powerless, perhaps it's worth turning to non-traditional sources. To those who understand the nature of what we've encountered. Church of SHADOWS. The old Catholic Church of St. Benedict is located in the northern part of the city, away from tourist routes. The building of gray stone, darkened by time and smog, resembles a fortress more than a place of worship. Narrow stained glass windows admit minimal light. A heavy wooden door creaks when I push it. Inside, semi-darkness, the smell of incense and wax candles. The few parishioners, mostly elderly people, have bowed their heads in prayer. In the far chapel, a hunched figure in a cassock arranges fresh flowers before a side altar. "I'm looking for Father Theodore," I say quietly, approaching. The monk straightens, and I see his face, ancient, lined with wrinkles, with deeply set dark eyes that seem to see more than the surface shows. "You found him, my son." His voice is creaky like old floorboards. "How can I help?" I don't know where to begin. How to explain in rational words the irrational experience of recent weeks. But something in his gaze suggests that this man won't dismiss my story as a sign of mental disorder. "My wife, something happened to her, something connected with mirrors and an ancient Venetian ritual." At the mention of Venice, his eyes narrow. He looks around as if checking whether anyone is eavesdropping, then signals me to follow him. "Not here," he says. "Too many ears, too many eyes, even in God's house." We descend a narrow spiral staircase to a crypt beneath the church. An ancient room with a low ceiling, walls of rough stone, the only light source, several candles in iron holders. Here books and manuscripts are stored, some looking as if they're several centuries old. "You're not the first to come to me with such a story," says Father Theodore, taking a leather folio from the top shelf. "Though the last time was almost 20 years ago, a young couple from Venice, she too, changed after encountering certain mirrors. He opens the book, and I see ancient engravings depicting rituals around mirror constructions. People in strange clothes surrounding a person at the center of a complex pattern of mirrors. The Venetian cult of keepers of reflected light, explains the monk, existed since the 15th century, officially destroyed by the Inquisition in 1729, but some practices continued secretly. He turns the page, showing a drawing of an alchemical laboratory with a central mirror surrounded by smaller ones. They believe that mirrors are not just reflective surfaces, but portals between worlds. With proper glass treatment and special lighting conditions, one could create a living mirror capable of retaining part of the viewer's soul. The next page contains detailed instructions for creating such mirrors, special alloys for amalgam, geometric proportions of the frame, a special polishing process. According to these texts, continues the monk, the main master of this art was one Gregor, whose surname is spelled differently in various sources. He created a perfect mirror that could not just capture parts of souls, but retain a complete human soul. Gregor Schrader, I pronounce. Father Theodore flinches. You know this name. His descendant, Victor Schrader, tried to recreate his ritual, used my wife as a conductor. The monk crosses himself, muttering a short prayer. The ritual was interrupted, he asks. Yes, I stopped it before. It could be completed. But blood was spilled on the mirror. His fingers gripped my arm with unexpected force. Yes, I recall drops of Schrader's blood falling on the central fragment. A little, but yes. Father Theodore closes his eyes, as if in prayer or deep regret. Even an incomplete ritual could cause soul splitting in your wife, he says finally. Part of her essence could be captured by the mirror and held there while something else could partially enter her. Something else, I ask. That which waited on the other side. The monk points to an engraving depicting a human figure half emerging from a mirror. Perhaps Gregor himself. According to these texts, he didn't die in 1729. He went into the mirror, becoming the first who could completely cross the boundary between worlds, but not the last to try to return. I remember Alice's words about the observer who waited and something ancient that looks from every reflection. Is this really possible? How can I help her? I ask, pushing doubts aside. It doesn't matter whether I believe all this. What matters is how to save Alice. There is only one way of healing, answers the monk, turning pages to a section written in fine print. Find and destroy the central mirror of the ritual, the one that connects all fragments together. Only then can your wife's soul fully return to her body. He turns a few more pages, showing a destruction ritual diagram. But this must be done with special care, he warns. The mirror will defend itself. It will use your own fears, your doubts, your strongest emotions against you, and he who waits behind the reflection won't release his prey easily. I study the instructions, memorizing key points. Much sounds like superstition and mysticism, but after everything I've seen, I can't dismiss the possibility that truth lies hidden in these ancient texts. Where should I look for the central mirror? I ask. It must be where the greatest power concentrates, answers the monk. In a place connected with the first ritual, possibly where Gregor himself lived or worked. Leaving the church, I already know my next destination. The beacon, Schrader said before his arrest. The same landmark mentioned by his guard. Now I need to find out where this beacon is and what connects it to Gregor Schrader's story. Guardian of Arifelici. The police evidence storage facility isn't a place you can just walk into. But my connections in law enforcement, remaining from my service days, open some doors. Detective Morrison, leading Schrader's case, agrees to meet me in an informal setting. The central mirror disappeared, he informs me, stirring coffee in a diner across from the station. Removed from storage 3 days ago by special order. Feds took it, blamed it all on national security. Feds, I ask, FBI. If only, he shakes his head. Some agency I've never even heard of. Specific clearance code, documents with seals I've never seen before. All done perfectly legally but smells like a rat. He continues, lowering his voice. And something else. Schrader's dead. Suicide in a pre-trial detention cell. Hanged himself with a sheet 6 hours after arrest. The surveillance camera accidentally turned off for 15 minutes. Guard stepped away. Classic staging. I feel a chill run down my spine. Too many coincidences, too many accidents. I have something else. Morrison pulls a folded sheet of paper from his inner pocket. Information about Schrader's relatives, the only living one, a maternal great uncle. Alessandro Vinci, 92 years old. Lighthouse keeper on North Island. Hermit, hasn't left the island in almost 40 years. North Island, a small patch of land 30 miles from the coast. Abandoned fishing village, old lighthouse, several outbuildings. The perfect place for someone who wants to remain unnoticed. Thank you, I say, taking the note. This could save my wife. Be careful, warns Morrison. Whatever is happening, it goes beyond ordinary crime. If the people who took the mirror become interested in you, I won't be able to help. 20 hours later, I'm on my way to the island. Left Alice under the supervision of my former comrade from the medical corps, the only person I can trust with my wife in such a condition. Sarah doesn't ask unnecessary questions and knows how to handle patients in crisis. The rented boat glides over dark water. The lighthouse grows out of the pre-dawn fog, a tall stone tower on a rocky outcrop. The structure looks much older than its official age, as if it stood here for centuries, contrary to historical records claiming the lighthouse was built in the 1890s. I dock on the leeward side where rocks form a natural protection from waves. Before me, a narrow path leading to buildings. The old keeper's house, sheds, the lighthouse itself. Everything looks well maintained despite its age. Someone clearly cares for this place. The house door isn't locked, a strange circumstance for such a secluded location. Inside, ascetic furnishings, simple furniture, bookshelves, an antique pendulum clock on the wall, but no signs of life. The hearth is cold, dishes clean and put away, bed neatly made. I examine room after room until I come across a door to the basement. It's not just locked, protected by a complex mechanical lock that looks inappropriately modern in this old house. My lock-picking skills prove useful. After 3 minutes, the door opens. The staircase leads deep underground, much deeper than a normal basement should be. Walls of rough stone, damp in places from condensation. The air grows colder with each step down. Finally, I reach the bottom. Before me, a tunnel leading in the direction of the lighthouse. A tunnel that shouldn't exist, the distance too great, the engineering solution too complex for standard 19th century construction. I move along it cautiously, keeping my gun ready. After 200 meters, the tunnel widens, revealing a spacious underground chamber directly beneath the lighthouse foundation. And what I see there makes me freeze in place. A room completely lined with mirrors. Hundreds, maybe thousands of mirrors of different sizes and shapes cover every inch of walls, ceiling, and even parts of the floor. They're placed at different angles, creating a kaleidoscope of reflections in which it's easy to lose orientation. In the center of the room, an old man in a chair, facing a huge mirror in an antique frame mounted on a stone pedestal. This mirror doesn't reflect the room. It seems filled with slowly moving bluish mist. The old man doesn't move when I enter. His withered body resembles a mummy, skin almost transparent with protruding veins. But his eyes, unnaturally bright blue, are alive and attentive. They watch me through the reflection in the central mirror. "Welcome, soldier." His voice sounds simultaneously ancient and powerful. "Victor said you might come." I raise my gun, aiming either at the old man or at the mirror. I haven't decided which poses the greater threat. "Who are you?" I ask, though I already guess the answer. "In this body I was known as Alessandro Vinci," answers the old man. "Before that was Edward Schrader and many more names over the centuries, but originally, Gregor, always Gregor." I scan the room, noticing oddities. On the walls, portraits of the same man in different clothes, corresponding to different eras. The oldest, judging by style, dated 1724. In each portrait, the same piercing blue eyes, the same studying gaze. "You're too late, soldier," continues the old man in a voice I recognize. It sounds almost identical to Victor Schrader's. "Victor was merely an instrument, as was your wife. The fragments have returned home. The process is irreversible." "What have you done to Alice?" My voice remains firm, despite the surrealistic situation. Nothing," the old man smiles, revealing yellow teeth. "It was she who opened the door, with her art, her gift to see what's hidden from others. Her soul is special, the perfect conductor between worlds." I take a step toward the central mirror, but the old man unexpectedly rises from his chair. His movements don't correspond to the age and fragility of his body. They're fluid, precise, with strength that seems impossible. "You don't understand what you faced, soldier," he says, and his voice changes, becoming deeper, resonating from the mirrored walls. "I existed beyond the edge for almost 3 centuries, observed, learned, waited. Human limitations no longer constrain me. And I understand that this is true. Before me is not a decrepit old man, but something merely using this body as a temporary vessel, something much more ancient and dangerous." Hash fragment in the palm. He lunges at me with inhuman speed. I barely manage to dodge, and his hand with unnaturally elongated fingers passes within millimeters of my throat. I fire twice, but he seems to anticipate my actions, easily evading the line of fire. I understand his advantage. The mirrors. They're arranged so that he sees me from any angle, predicting every movement. The room is designed as a perfect trap for those who don't understand the principle of its operation. We circle around the room. I try to maintain distance. He continuously attacks, moving so fast that at times it seems I'm fighting several opponents simultaneously. His body, despite its age, possesses the strength and flexibility of a trained athlete. "Your wife is now part of something greater," he says between attacks, "as are others whose reflections I've collected for centuries. Small fragments of souls feeding me, allowing me to exist between worlds." He delivers a strike that I block with my forearm, but the pain is piercing, like a collision with a metal rod, not human flesh. "The body is merely a vessel," he continues, as if reading my thoughts. "This one is almost 100 years old, but it serves its purpose. Soon I'll need a new one, younger, stronger." I begin to tire. Each of my movements becomes slightly slower, each block slightly less effective. He drives me into a corner where mirrors form a semicircle, cutting off escape routes. In a desperate lunge, I throw myself forward, trying to break through to the central mirror, the one that, according to the monk, is the key to the entire system. But the old man intercepts me, his fingers closing around my throat with the strength of a steel trap. "You thought you could defeat something that has existed for centuries," he hisses, lifting me off the floor. "I've survived the Inquisition, revolutions, wars. I've seen empires fall and new ones be born. What are you against this, soldier?" My vision darkens, lungs burning from oxygen deprivation. I realize I'm losing, that my military training is useless against something that doesn't obey the laws of human physiology. And then I notice a peculiarity. The antique pendulum clock, hanging on the only section of wall without mirrors. Its reflection is visible in many mirrors around, but the pendulum moves at different speeds in different reflections. In some, slower; in others, faster than the original. Sudden understanding pierces me. Time and reflections flows differently. This isn't just a visual effect, it's a fundamental property of Gregor's mirrors, and possibly his vulnerability. Gathering my last strength, I don't try to attack the old man. Instead, I grab my knife and throw it not at my opponent, but at the central mirror on the pedestal. The blade cuts through the air and embeds itself in the surface of the ancient artifact. For a moment nothing happens, just a thin crack runs from the point of impact. Then the mirror shatters into hundreds of fragments with a deafening sound, like the scream of 1,000 voices. The grip on my throat weakens. I fall to the floor, gasping for air, and see the old man recoiling, his face contorted with pain and fury. "What have you done?" he cries, but his voice is no longer so powerful. "Centuries of work." With horror and fascination, I watch his body begin to disintegrate. The skin shrivels, cracks, exposing bones. The eyes, still bright blue, burn with rage but gradually dim. He tries to reach for me, but his limbs no longer obey. Within a minute that seems like eternity, what was Gregor Schrader turns into a desiccated mummy, crumbling at the slightest movement of air. From the great alchemist who survived centuries, only a handful of dust and darkened bones remain. All mirrors in the room dim, their surfaces covered with a network of cracks, like a sympathetic response to the destruction of the central one. The blue light that pulsated in them disappears, leaving only ordinary reflections. I rise feeling a strange silence, not just the absence of sound, but the absence of a presence which, I now realize, pressed upon my consciousness the entire time I was in this room. My phone rings, making me jump. It's Sarah watching over Alice. "James," her voice sounds excited but with notes of relief. "I don't know what you did, but Alice just came to her senses, really came to her senses. She's disoriented but recognizes me, asks meaningful questions." "I'll be there soon," I answer, feeling a wave of relief wash over me. Tell her it's all over." Leaving the underground room, I notice how one of the central mirror fragments strangely flickers, retaining an echo of blue light. Almost unconsciously, I pick it up, a sharp fragment the size of a coin. The moment I touch it, I feel a slight discharge of static electricity and instinctively clench my hand. The fragment digs into my palm, leaving a shallow but painful cut. I want to throw it away, but something stops me. Instead, I put the fragment in my pocket, deciding to deal with it later. Right now, the main thing is to return to Alice. 3 days later, Alice and I return to a semblance of normal life. She has fully recovered physically, but suffers from partial amnesia, remembers nothing about the events of recent months, doesn't remember Schrader or the ritual or her obsession with mirrors. Doctors say this is a protective mechanism of the psyche, blocking traumatic memories. I don't insist on their return. Some things are better left in oblivion. Learning from me about the infidelity with Marcus Reinur, the only part of events I considered necessary to tell her. She cries, begging forgiveness, genuinely horrified by her actions. "I don't understand how I could do this," she says, wiping away tears. "It's completely unlike me, I feel, as if it was someone else in my body." "It was," I answer, embracing her, "and now that someone is gone forever." We decide to remove all mirrors from the house, replace them with simple functional surfaces where necessary. As if by silent agreement, neither of us wants to see our reflections more than absolutely necessary. On the last evening, as we complete this process, I embrace Alice, watching the sunset through our living room window. "We don't need reflections to see love," I say, kissing her temple. She smiles, nestling against me, and at this moment I notice something glinting in my palm. The fragment of Venetian mirror that I picked up at the lighthouse somehow ended up deep under my skin. I don't remember the wound being that serious, but now the fragment seems to have grown into the flesh, becoming part of me. And most disturbing, it pulses with faint blue light in rhythm with my heartbeat. I close my palm, hiding the glow from Alice. Perhaps tomorrow I'll consult a doctor about removing the fragment. Perhaps it's just a play of light in my imagination, overloaded by recent events. Or perhaps the hunt for reflections isn't yet complete, and now I carry a particle of the mirror world inside me, as a constant reminder that the boundary between reality and reflection is thinner than we're accustomed to think. I hold Alice tighter, as if afraid she might disappear, and deep inside I feel the fragment in my palm growing slightly warmer, almost alive. If you enjoyed this story, please support the author with a like, subscribe to the channel, and share your emotions in the comments. Thank you.